Thessaloniki. We will visit the historical and cultural landmarks and monuments of the capital of North Greece. The tour is divided into 5 sections. We will point out historic buildings and places of interest as we come to each section, and also highlight places of interest which are not on the bus route but are close by. We are passing the new town wall, which is the largest building in the city and covers an area of 15,000 square meters. Situated close to its northern side, you will find the museum of the Byzantine Empire in 1453, when the empire was overrun by the Ottoman Turks. In addition to the permanent exhibition, the museum also mounts special exhibitions, which are well worth looking out for. The Archaeological Museum is on the right-hand side of Manolis Andronikos Street, a short distance from the Byzantine Museum. The Archaeological Museum has a fascinating collection of artifacts from the dawn of prehistory until late antiquity. The exhibition allows visitors to glimpse life lived long ago, and the museum is noted for its educational programs, 2000 hours, from Tuesdays to Sundays. Continuing up Angelakis Street, we turn into Alexandrou Svolo Street and come across Navarino Square, which is one of the largest historic squares in Thessaloniki. It is very popular with the student population and tourists alike, and is close to the Roman remains, which contained not. The site is dominated by the Galerian Arch, which was built by the Romans to honor the Emperor Galerius. Square, which was the site of the racecourse built by the Romans. Today, it is the site of Megarobilis, which houses the city's center for the history of Thessaloniki. The center has an extensive archive of historical documents and photographs. Continuing along Alexandrou Svolo Street, we come to the Church of Hagia Sophia. The church was built in the mid-7th century and was a cathedral church of the city throughout the Byzantine era. It became a Roman Catholic cathedral during the Frankish occupation, later becoming a mosque during the Ottoman era from 1523 until 1912. After the liberation of Thessaloniki in 1912, it once more became an Orthodox cathedral. Leaving the cathedral, we come to the ancient church of Panagia Ahiropiitou, which was consecrated in 431 and is still in use, making it one of the oldest working Christian Orthodox churches in existence. The church lies between Egnatia and Philippou streets and contains an image of the Virgin Mary praying, surrounded by angels. Bearing southwest towards the sea from Hagia Sophia Square, you will come to the Museum of the Macedonian Struggle. It housed the Consulate General of Greece from 1893 until 1912 and has a wonderful collection of uniforms and personal items belonging to the protagonists of the Macedonian struggle. There is also a collection of 1,350 photographs from that period. Adjacent to the museum is the Cathedral of St. Gregory Palamas, Archbishop of Thessaloniki in the 14th century. He was well read, but decided to follow a spiritual life when he was 18 and went to Mount Athos and found peace at the holy monastery of Great Lavra. Passing Hagia Sophia Square and turning left, we come to Anopoli Street. The holy monastery of St. Theodora used to be a Byzantine convent, but was disbanded during the 18th century when it became a parish church. The current building was constructed in 1937, replacing the older building, which was destroyed in the Great Fire of 1917. Since 1975, the church has reverted to monastic use and is now the home to monks. Under the wing, facing Anopoli Street, the Byzantine foundations of the monastery of St. Stephen are visible. We have now come to the pedestrianised Aristotle Street, which leads to the iconic Aristotle Square, with excellent views over the Thermikos Gulf. The square is the heart of the city and was designed by the architect Ernest M. Brahe after the catastrophic fire of 1917 destroyed most of the historic centre of the city. Monsieur M. Brahe was the president of the International Committee for the Regeneration of the City and created a fusion of Byzantine and Western architectural styles when creating the square. The square is a social hub for the city, and its many cafes and hotels act as a magnet to citizens and visitors alike, from a breakfast coffee to late-night drinks. Close to Aristotle Square is another historic square. Eleftheria Square, or Freedom Square, saw the disembarkation of Allied troops during the First World War and the arrival of the Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos in 1916 to set up a provisional government. It was also the site of a workers' uprising in 1936. And the internment and deportation of a large number of Thessaloniki's Jewish community in 1942. A memorial to the Holocaust is situated in the square, and the Jewish Museum at 17 St. Minas Street is definitely worth visiting. The museum is based in the heart of the then Jewish community and traces the history of the first Sephardic Spanish Jews who settled in Thessaloniki to the later war years. The permanent exhibition is called Thessaloniki, Metropolis Separadismo. In addition, there is an extensive photographic collection of the Holocaust. The second part of our tour finds us in Anopoli Street, and on the left-hand side we can see the renowned covered market called Modiano. It was built in 1922 by the Jewish engineer Eli Modiano. Although there has been modernization, parts of the original building still exist, and the area still retains something of the past. Amongst the shops, visitors can find a plethora of traditional usuries and tavernas, whose mouth-watering aromas entice citizens and visitors alike. Turning right into Venizelos Street, just before coming to Egnatia Street, the Bezesteni Market, or covered market, can be found on the left-hand side. The market is a fine example of 16th century Turkish architecture and is one of a pair of buildings, the other being a ceres. It was originally a textile market, and travellers from the 18th century marvelled at its richness, believing it to be the finest market in the Balkans. Eventually, the building also became home to goldsmiths as well as textile sellers. As we pass the intersection Egnatia Street, on your left you will see the old caravanserai, in Greek, the name meant Palace of the Caravans, where travellers from all over the provinces would find a hostel and stables for their animals. Today, the area is used as a parking area for taxis, including provincial taxis, and for more than 50 years, the area was also home to the town hall until it relocated to its present position, which we saw at the beginning of our tour. In front of the caravanserai is the Hamza Bey Hammam, known locally as Al-Khazar. The name Al-Khazar was derived from the name of an old picture house that used to stand there. The building dates from 1467 and is the only peristyle mosque courtyard in southern Europe. Close to the caravanserai on Egnatia Street is the 11th century church of the Pania Halkion. The name is thought to derive from its sister church in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, and means the Lady of the Coppersmiths, as they were both situated close to copper workshops. As you can see, the church appears to be sunken. This occurred due to the extensive earthworks following the catastrophic fire of 1917. The church is cruciform in style with a 4-column dome. On the opposite side of the square from the church is the Bey Hammam. The building was completed in 1444, shortly after the Ottoman Turks conquered Thessaloniki, and was in continuous use until 1968. The Ministry of Culture took it over in 1972, and after being renovated under the auspices of the 9th Ephorate of Byzantine Antiquities, was turned into an exhibition space. Although not on our itinerary, the ancient Agora close to the Panagia Halkia Roniki until the late 7th century. St. Demetrius streets. It was built in 1891 by the Italian architect Italiano Pozzelli, who used an ecclesiastical motif in his design. The building was originally on 3 floors and housed the Turkish prefect of Thessaloniki and the Ottoman civil service. In 1907, it was taken over by the Turkish law school. After the liberation of Thessaloniki, the building was taken over by the general administration following the surrender of the Ottoman commander Taksim Pasha to the Greek army on October 26, 1912. It is now the headquarters of the General Secretariat of Macedonia Thrace. The Tsinare area is home to traditional architecture of many quaint developments, and visitors are reminded of the old houses of Thessaloniki before modernization. On our left is perhaps the most important building in Thessaloniki. The 5th century church of St. Demetrius was awarded World Heritage status by UNESCO. The church was built in the middle of the 5th century and is dedicated to St. Demetrius, the patron saint of Thessaloniki. Following the liberation from the Ottoman Turks, the church was rededicated to St. Demetrius. Unfortunately, The church was badly damaged by the Great Fire of 1917 and had to be rebuilt. Fortunately, the most famous mosaic, dating from the 7th century, was spared and attracts visitors from all over the world. The mosaic is located on the west side of the church and depicts Saint Demetrius with 2 children, flanked by a local dignitary and a bishop. Now we come to the third part of our tour as we leave the city centre and make our way to Anopoli, or Upper Town. Historically, in the early 1920s, it also became home to refugees from Asia Minor. Anopoli is the cultural heart of Thessaloniki and contains some of the city's most important monuments. Just above Cassandra Street, and before we reach Olympiadou Street, on the right-hand side of the bus, we can see the Byzantine church of the Panayir Lagolialis, which has belonged to the Lateran monastery since 1380. The church was used as a convent during the Byzantine era and got its name following the serendipitous finding of an image of the Virgin Mary with 3 hands. The third silver hand in the picture is a tribute to St. John of Damascus. The church's name means Virgin Mary who leads people to the right path. We'll shortly arrive in Romfy Square in Kule Cafe, which has many interesting old buildings. This used to be the Turkish quarter, although it was difficult to distinguish it from the neighbouring Christian quarter of Lateran Monastery, as Christians and Muslims tended to live cheek by jowl in the 16th century as the town developed. On the north side of Romfy Square, on Christmo Street, stands an important example of Balkan architecture. The house has a double facade and represents a fusion of classical architecture with local motifs and Turkish architectural details. It was a high school until 1980 and was then restored by the Ministry of Culture and is now used as a cultural centre and library. In the neighbourhood of Kule Cafe, you can find an authentic Byzantine bathhouse. The building dates from around the end of the 13th century, or possibly the beginning of the 14th century. In the Greco-Roman world, the presence of public baths indicated an urban rather than a rural population, and was important in the social and cultural life of the community, continuing this role into the Christian era. This bathhouse is a rare example in Greece and was in continual use until 1940. On the corner of Hagia Sophia Street and Theophilou Street is a building that combines a mixture of traditional and neoclassical architecture. The building at 25 Theophilou Street is an example of typical Anopoli architecture, featuring strong elements from neoclassical architecture. It is a 2-story house with a symmetrical facade and was originally used as a school for Turkish students. Over the years, it has been considerably altered internally as it changed owners. The upper city of Thessaloniki has always been a source of urban myths and folklore, passed down orally from generation to generation, from Ottoman times to the present. One of these tales involves a dervish called Baba Musa, a Muslim saint whose bones were kept for several years in the Turbe, or mausoleum, which still stands today in Terpsitheus Square. At the base of the mausoleum, there is a chapel dedicated to St. George. If you would like to explore Anopoli, the number 22 bus route covers several streets in the upper town. As we continue our tour, We will next see the 14th century church of the Taxiarchon, or Archangels, which is on the right-hand side of the road. At the bus stop at the top of the hill, at the junction of three roads, there is a signpost for the Church of St. David. This is a historically important church which was built around the end of the 5th century or beginning of the 6th century. The other name for the church is Latamur Monastery, which dates from the early years of the 9th century, when the church was used as a monastery. The church contains the only early Christian mosaics of Christ as a young and beardless man sitting on a colourful bright bow, representing the vision of Ezekiel. These mosaics can be found in the apse of the church. As we near the northern side of Thessaloniki and drive through the narrow streets, we come to the heart of Anopoli. Fortunately, this part escaped the devastation of the Great Fire of 1917. This is an area steeped in history, and cobbled streets meander past picturesque old houses, mixture of Balkan architecture and neoclassical designs, and lead to leafy squares with splashing fountains. This is a veritable oasis in the concrete desert of the modern city. It is a real delight for residents and visitors alike. As we arrive at Aia Anagiri Square, we enter the fourth part of our journey. Here you will find many traditional homes as well as picturesque hosieries, tavernas and dance halls. This area is typically Greek and offers authentic food and music. Near Trigonio, you will see the gate of Anopoli, connecting the city boundary with Anopoli. Around 1355 AD, when the Empress Anna Paleolovina lived in Thessaloniki, she began renovations to the walls as Thessaloniki was preparing to face the attack by Cantacuzzinos and his son Stephen Dusan, Emperor of Serbia. At the same time, two gates were opened in the walls, one of them in the west. The high point of our tour is a visit to Eptaperio, which owes its name, like its namesake in Constantinople, to its 7 rectangular towers. During the Ottoman reign, it was used as the Turkish commander's headquarters. From the late 18th century until 1989, the premises was used as a maximum security prison, better known as Yedikule. It has inspired many poets and songwriters who used it as an inspiration for folk songs. Many of these songs are still sung today in local nightclubs, entertaining local people. Leaving behind the Acropolis of Thessaloniki and travelling through its second gate, Potara, we arrive at Vlatadon Monastery. From the bus, only the entrance to the monastery is visible. This monastery is under the auspices of the Ecumenical Patriarchy of Constantinople and is the only operating Byzantine monastery in Thessaloniki. It was built around 1360. Sultan Mehmed II awarded privileges to this monastery because of its position as a conduit for the water pipeline from Otyati to the city. Amongst the newer buildings situated in the open green area around the monastery are the Igomeniou and the Patriarchal Foundation for Religious Studies for the priesthood, which was founded in 1968. The foundation also conserves manuscripts and rare icons from the Holy Mountain. The monastery also has a large collection of particularly valuable icons dating from the 12th to the 19th centuries, in its sacristy. As we descend to the centre of the city, we can see the gardens of Pasha on our left, created in 1904. This large open space was enclosed by a high rampart. Pine trees were planted. A sitting area with a fountain, springs and other decorative elements were included to provide a comfortable and cool retreat for visitors as well as magnificent views of the city. The gardens are an example of marvellous architecture in an open space and a unique integrated creation of such architectural forms have been there. The number 24 bus route, which runs between Eleftheria Square and Helia Deadline, will take you to a beautiful location at the edge of the Sake Forest of Cedar Hill. The Theatre of the Forest is located there and has a varied summer program of concerts and other cultural events. The Thessaloniki Zoo is also located there, with 58 acres of wilderness, and is home to many endangered local species, including bears, deer, bobcats, pelicans, birds of prey and wild sheep. To visit the church of Ius Nicholas Orphanus on Herodotus Street, which is an outstanding monument dating from the early 14th century. In the nave, you can see scenes of the Passion, the Resurrection, a visual representation of the Holy Liturgy and of the saints. Scenes of the Akathistos hymn decorate the north arch. Scenes from the life of St. Nicholas and the Menologium decorate the west arch, and some miracles of Christ and the Virgin Mary, the life of St. Gerasimos the Jordanite, decorate the south arch. The frescoes are the work of the late Paleologan Renaissance. There are two chapels dedicated to St. Sava and St. Barbara. The church is located between Herodotus Street and Apostolou Pavlou Street and is open to the public every day except Monday from 0800 hours to 1300 hours. Other places of interest, which should be in your itinerary, include the Folklore and Ethnological Museum of Thessaloniki. This delightful museum is housed in the former residence of Jacob Modiano and was designed by Eli Modiano. The residence was purchased by the Greek government in 1913 for the royal family and later became the official residence of the Governor-General of Macedonia. The museum's collection includes over 20,000 items which come mainly from Macedonia and Thrace. Amongst the exhibits are collections of costumes, textiles and jewellery, as well as furniture, tools and equipment, and musical instruments. There is also an interesting collection of figurines and shadow puppets. The Military Museum contains relics from the Second Balkan War in 1913, from the Battle of La Chana, including paintings, swords and other military equipment from various eras, as well as battle plans. The State Museum of Contemporary Art and the Macedonian Museum of Modern Art in Thessaloniki exhibit the best examples of Greek and international modern art in excellent surroundings. The Thessaloniki Museum of Photography has a wide-ranging collection and is the only museum of its type in Greece. The Theatre Museum has a fascinating collection of Greek film memorabilia and also has a conservation program to preserve film stock. The Olympic Sports Museum and the Museum of Ancient and Byzantine Musical Instruments. part of our tour. We will pass in front of the Turkish consulate, which is on the right-hand side. It was the birthplace of the father of modern Turkey, Kemal Atatürk. We are now getting Izmir Street, and on the right-hand side, remnants of the old eastern wall are visible, as is the iconic landmark, the Rotonda. The Rotonda was so named because of its round shape, and was used as a place of worship, from the pagans' use to early Christianity, when the building was known as the Church of the ΟΣΕΘ, according to the writings of Bishop Evstathios of Thessaloniki. In 1590, it was converted into a mosque by Sheikh Suleiman. In more recent times, it converted back to Christianity, and took its current name from the small church of St. George, which lies to the northwest of the Rotonda. The building was badly damaged by an earthquake in 1978, but has since undergone restoration work. The mosaics are amongst the most important early Christian artwork, and in the center of the dome, Christ, the victor over life and death, is surrounded by the faces of angels. There is also a fresco depicting the ascension of Christ, accompanied by the Virgin Mary and the apostles. South of the Rotonda lies a triumphal arch dedicated to the Emperor Galerius, which was constructed in 305 AD, following his victory over the Persians. The Arch of Galerius was part of the palace complex, and the victory of Galerius over the Persian king Narses is commemorated in the 4 pillars of the monument. Within walking distance of the arch of the Rotonda, at the junction of Ariano Street and Iassonido Street, is the Byzantine Church of St. Panteleimon. It is modelled on the Byzantine monastery of the Virgin Perivleptou, which was a 14th century spiritual centre. The Holy Church, or Lady of Mercy, was so named because the Virgin is shown in an icon holding Jesus in her right hand, instead of the common convention of holding the Christ child in her left hand. Now we come to the third part of our tour as we leave the city centre and make our way to Anopoli, or Upper Town. Historically, it has been home to Greeks, Turks and Jews, and after the exchange of populations in the early 1920s, it also became home to refugees from Asia Minor. Anopoli is the cultural heart of Thessaloniki and contains some of the city's most important monuments. Just above Cassandra Street, and before we reach Olympiado Street, on the right-hand side of the bus, we can see the Byzantine church of the Panayia Lagoulianis, which has belonged to the Lateran monastery since 1380. The church was used as a convent during the Byzantine era and got its name following the serendipitous finding of an image of the Virgin Mary with 3 hands. The third silver hand in the picture is a tribute to St. John of Damascus. The church's name means we'll shortly arrive in Romfis Square in Kule Cafe, which has many interesting old buildings. This used to be the Turkish quarter, although it was difficult to distinguish it from the neighbouring Christian quarter of Lateran Monastery, as Christians and Muslims tended to live cheek by jowl in the 16th century as the town developed. On the north side of Romfis Square, on Crispo Street, stands an important example of Balkan architecture. The house has a double facade and represents architectural details. It was a high school until 1980 and was then restored by the Ministry of Culture and is now used as a cultural centre and library. In the neighbourhood of Kule Cafe, you can find an authentic Byzantine bathhouse. The building dates from around the end of the 13th century, or possibly the beginning of the 14th century. In the Greco-Roman world, the presence of public baths indicated an urban rather than a rural population, and was important in the social and cultural life of the community. Continuing this role into the Christian era, this bathhouse is a rare example in Greece and was in continual use until 1940. Has always been a source of urban myths and folklore passed down orally from generation to generation, from Ottoman times to the present. One of these tales involves a dervish called Baba Musa, a Muslim saint whose bones were kept for several years in the Turbe, or mausoleum, which still stands today in Terpsitheus Square. At the base of the mausoleum, there is a chapel dedicated to St. George. If you would like to explore Anopoli, the number 22 bus route covers several streets in the upper town. As we continue our tour, we will next see the 14th century church of the Taxiarchon, or Archangels, which is on the right-hand side of the road. At the bus stop at the top of the hill, at the junction of three roads, there is a signpost for the Church of St. David. This is a historically important church which was built around the end of the 5th century or beginning of the 6th century. The other name for the church is Latamur Monastery, which dates from the early years of the 9th century, when the church was used as a monastery. The church contains the only early Christian mosaics of Christ as a young and beardless man sitting on a colourful bright bow, representing the vision of Ezekiel. These mosaics can be found in the apse of the church. As we near the northern side of Thessaloniki and drive through the narrow streets, we come to the heart of Anopoli. Fortunately, this part escaped the devastation of the Great Fire of 1917. This is an area steeped in history, and cobbled streets meander past picturesque old houses, a mixture of Balkan architecture and neoclassical designs, and lead to leafy squares with splashing fountains. This is a veritable oasis in the concrete desert of the modern city. It is a real delight for residents and visitors alike. Panoramic view of the city below, as well as a good view of the Byzantine walls that were constructed by Theodore. We are now coming to the final part of our tour. We will pass in front of the Turkish consulate, which is on the right-hand side. It was the birthplace of the father of modern Turkey, Kemal Atatürk. We are now in Ethniki Zamini Street, and on the right-hand side, remnants of the old eastern wall are visible, as is the iconic landmark, the Rotonda. The Rotonda was so named because of its round shape, and was used as a place of worship, from the pagans' use to early Christianity, when the building was known as the Church of the Asomaton, according to the writings of Bishop Evstathios of Thessaloniki. In 1590, it was converted into a mosque by Sheikh Suleiman Hotazi. In more recent times, it reverted back to Christianity and took its current name from the small church of St. George, which lies to the northwest of the Rotonda. The building was badly damaged by an earthquake in 1978, but has since undergone restoration work. The mosaics are amongst the most important early Christian artworks. There is also a fresco depicting the Ascension of Christ, accompanied by the Virgin Mary and the Apostles. of the Rotonda lies the triumphal arch dedicated to the Emperor Galerius, which was constructed in 305 AD, following his victory over the Persians. The Arch of Galerius was part of the palace complex, and the victory of Galerius over the Persian king Narses is commemorated in the four pillars of the monument. Within walking distance of the arch of the Rotonda, at the junction of Arianu Street and Iasoulidou Street, is the Byzantine church of St. Panteleimon. It is modelled on the Byzantine monastery of the Virgin Peribleptou, which was a 14th century spiritual centre. The Holy Church of the Dedication of Christ to God is opposite the Cathedral of Panagia Dexia and contains important Christian miniature work. The Cathedral of Panagia Dexia, or Lady of Mercy, was so named because the Virgin is shown in an icon holding Jesus in her right hand, instead of the common convention of holding the Christ child in her left hand. On the left-hand side of Ethnikisa Street, you can see the university campus of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. It was the brainchild of the great Greek statesman Eleftheris Venizelos, and was founded by the former Prime Minister Alexander Papanastasiou in 1924. The first department to open was the School of Philosophy in 1926, followed in 1927 by the School of Physics and Mathematics and the first department of Forestry. In 1929, the university expanded to include the departments of Law and Economics and added the schools of Medicine and Theology in 1942. In 1950, the School of Veterinary Science opened, and later the School of Dentistry and the Engineering and Architectural schools were also opened. The university campus extends over an area of 430,000 square meters, as well as having departments off campus in other parts of northern Greece. For more than 80 years, the university has been the largest provider of tertiary education in Greece and southeastern Europe. As we come to the end of our tour, we must not forget to mention the Egnatia Way, which was first built by the Romans as a trade and military route between 146 to 120 BC. The road started in the city of Apollonia in modern-day Albania and is now called Durai, and continued to Thessaloniki and ended at Constantinople in the 4th century AD. Nowadays, in Thessaloniki, Egnatia Street follows the ancient route. At the junction of Angelaki Street, Ethnikisa Street and Egnatia Street stands a square fountain, which for generations has provided a meeting place for residents and visitors alike. Thessaloniki is famous for its shops, and its main shopping street is called Siliski, in honor of the great emperor and general John Siliski. Here you will find many high-quality fashion brands, as well as some of the best shoe shops in Europe. over Tsivisky Street and head in a westerly direction, you will find yourself in the cosmopolitan and historic district of Ladadega, which is noted for its fine dining and plethora of bars and cafes.